Greetings to all my tech heads out there in the KevTechify nation, and if you're new here, welcome. In this episode, we're going to look at traffic characteristics. We'll be discussing traffic characteristics, network traffic trends, and then finally we'll look at voice, video, and data. This episode is part of my series on enterprise networking, security, and automation for the CCNA. I'm Kevin here at KevTechify. Let's get this adventure started. Voice traffic and video traffic place greater demands on our network, and they're one of the main reasons that we need quality of service on our network. Though voice and video are somewhat similar, there are still differences between them. Voice is not very network intensive. It does not send a lot across the network. If we look at the actual bandwidth being sent, the bandwidth here is 30 to 128 kilobits per second. So 30 to 128 kilobits. Video's bandwidth starts at 384 kilobits and can go all the way up to 20 or more megabits per second. So video needs a lot more bandwidth. When we look at the network throughput for voice, it's fairly smooth. You can see a line here. The blue line goes straight across for the most part. It's very smooth and what we call benign, meaning it's there, but it's not really affecting a whole lot. There's not a lot of spikes in it. It's not very active. It's just there, and it's a smooth and it's predictable. Video, on the other hand, is what we call bursty. It sends out bursts of information and then it slows down, and then all of a sudden it sends out a lot of information at once. So looking at the amount of traffic for a video conversation, you can see that there's peaks and that there's valleys in our conversation. It's also very greedy, and that greedy comes back down to 20 megabits per second for some videos. So it does need a lot of bandwidth. Now, voice and video, they are drop sensitive. If they have too many drops, you're going to lose part of that conversation, and it's not going to be a good experience for your end user. When we talk about the amount of loss, typically voice, you're at less than 1% of voices or of drop packets for voice is acceptable. With video, we're down to 0.1%, maybe up to 1% of drop packets is acceptable, but it still causes some inconvenience to the end users. They are delay sensitive. So if that data is delayed at all, the end user is not going to have a good experience using your voice or video. So what we look at here is the latency and the jitter. For the latency and the jitter for the voice, it's a little bit stricter. For the latency for voice is 150 milliseconds. Video can be up to 200 to 400. Jitter should be less than 30 milliseconds for both of these. When we compare these, they're similar because they all need a high priority, but voice is more predictable, takes less bandwidth. Video is less predictable, it's bursty, and it needs a lot more bandwidth. Here's a couple of charts of the data going across your network for voice and video packets. We can see here, when we look at the voice, we have our audio samples. They are fairly regular, every 20 milliseconds. They are at a constant height, and comparing that height to the video, they're not very high. So they're predictable, they're smooth, they're constant. Or if you look at video, there it's not as constant, not as smooth. Depending upon what's happening in the video, if it's still, like I'm showing a PowerPoint in the background, my video is fairly smooth. So you're not going to have a lot of bandwidth. But if we were streaming something else with a lot of motion, a movie, a video game, that would have a lot of packets going across there. And we can see here that in between these 33 millisecond packets, where there's not a lot of motion happening, there's nothing going across here. So right in here, right in here, right in here, there's not a lot of motion. There's not a lot of change on your screen. But when there's a lot of motion, oh, there's a lot of packets going across. And so this is that bursty feel that we get with video. Plus, once again, it's very greedy, the video. And video places a greater demand on your network. Data traffic is different than voice and video. Generally, it's not as demanding as voice and video. And a lot of data is sent with TCP transmissions. And that means we have TCP retransmits handle the data going across your network. And most of the time, that makes it insensitive to drops and delays. So we are delay and drop insensitive because of the TCP retransmits. When we look at data, it's also very unpredictable. Depending upon what your company does, what's going across your network, it could be smooth traffic. If all you're doing on your network is looking at web pages to do your business, checking emails, you're going to have a very smooth and benign network. But if you have a very active network where you're doing video conference calls and you're streaming videos, you're uploading big files to the cloud somewhere, it's going to be, your network traffic is going to be greedy and very bursty. There are different types of traffic, and we can kind of classify them as mission critical and not mission critical. And we can also look at interactive and not interactive. If you have interactive and mission critical, and this would be like financial transactions, there is the expectation of a quick response time. However, a lot of data is not mission critical and not interactive. And that would be like a standard web page, and that can be least prioritized. It was my pleasure to provide you with this wonderful episode on traffic characteristics. If you like this episode and you got value out of it, please click that like button, give a 5-star rating, leave a comment. This all helps me bring you more great content. Please take a minute to subscribe to my channel. All my socials and contact information are on my website, KevTechify.com. There, you can find out how to get all these episodes in video and podcast form. In the upper right is my playlist for my series on enterprise networking, security, and automation for the CCNA. In the bottom right is one of my favorite videos that I linked just for you. Thank you so much for watching this episode of my series on enterprise networking, security, and automation for the CCNA. Once again, I'm Kevin. This is KevTechify. I'll see you next time for another great adventure.